So, there's been a lot of Muppets news recently, which isn't something I'm used to. Let's talk about it.
Soarin to tower. We are ready for takeoff.
As any Muppets fan can tell you, Disney and the Muppets have a complicated relationship. It seems like Disney really wants to make the Muppets work, but also doesn't quite know how the Muppets work. So what we end up with is a new project being announced every year or a couple of years. Some will do really well, and some won't. But either way, Disney will move on to the next project within a couple of years. That's why it was weird to get two pieces of Muppets news within as many days. On August 21st, Disney gave us the first real look at the Muppets takeover of Rock and Roller Coaster, other than that one poster. First of all, officially confirming that it will still be called Rock and Roller Coaster, which I actually don't mind. There was a problem with Splash Mountain. Tiana's Bayou Adventure is a perfectly fine name, but with how little they ended up changing the actual ride, it is still Splash Mountain, just rethemed. And so especially with how iconic Splash Mountain was, in conjunction with the other mountains, and they were the Disney World mountains, a lot of people still call it Splash Mountain, and so in this case, if it's still going to be Rock and Roller Coaster, which, it was likely going to always be the same general ride, I don't mind the fact that they're keeping the name. That way people are going to call it that anyway. You might as well avoid the confusion with people, some people call it the old name, some people call it the new name. It's okay to be still be called the Rock and Roller Coaster, especially since you can just swap out the starring. And I like the fact that it's starring the Muppets, not just the Electric Mayhem. It's unlikely that I think Disney would have ever built a Muppets attraction not with the name the Muppets, or wouldn't have featured the main Muppets. I think Kermit and the gang were always going to be in the ride. It was just going to be focused on the Electric Mayhem, which is exciting, I think, because the Electric Mayhem haven't been, they weren't really in Muppet Vision. They weren't really in a lot of the media, except for, the show all about them. But I think it's exciting that the Mayhem get a chance to shine, and the rest of the Muppets get a chance to be in the ride. So Disney shared two pieces of concept art. The first one was at the outside of the attraction, which looks pretty much identical to how it looks now. They added some lights behind the building, and I don't know if that's actually going to be there, or if that's just for concept art. It looks like sort of the concert premiere pitch lights. I don't know if that's going to be there or not. I don't think it's there now. I know the lights on the guitar are there. They seem brighter, and I imagine that's just because concept art. They did repaint the bottom of the guitar to match the Electric Mayhem bus design, and they added a little piano in like the shrubs underneath the guitar with a golden key to match Dr. Teeth's golden tooth, which is a nice touch. Other than that, the lighting pattern looks a little different, but it's not that different. And that seems to be the trend with this whole retheme. Is it's a retheme, and it's going to be one of those there's how expensive an overlay is and how well done it is, and this seems like it's one of the cheap but well done overlays, where it's not going to be a big overhaul from the ground up. It's not even going to be that groundbreaking, but it'll be well done. And this seems like, alright, there's attention to detail, there's homages to the original media, it's well done, but they didn't do that much, which, I think I prefer to something that takes bigger swings but misses. At least I know they're, landing the swings they take here. And then the second piece of concept art they shared was the more in-depth one. This was of the pre-show area. So in the pre-show for Rock and Roller Coaster right now, you walk into the recording studio, and you can see Aerosmith has just finished recording a session, and then they're like, hey, we gotta go. Why don't you come with us, though? And then you leave out into the limos. And that looks like the same thing here. But interestingly, they've sort of swapped the orientation of the room. Because right now when you go in there, you are behind a pane of glass, and you can see into the recording studio. So they have a bunch of instruments and different sort of props around. And then they have another pane of glass, and on the other side of that glass is Aerosmith in the sound booth. So you see in the recording studio, on the other side of that is the sound booth, and that's where Aerosmith is via a screen. But here they've actually swapped that. So you are looking into the sound booth, and then on the other side of the glass, that's the recording studio where the Mayhem is performing, which I think just makes more sense. I think, first of all, it helps to fill the space. The Rock and Roller Coaster pre-show always sort of felt like it was an empty room. They did actually have a bit when the ride first opened, where Steven Tyler would ask for someone to get his guitar, and then a cast member would walk through the door in the back of the room, get the actual guitar out of the room, and then bring it backstage.
Chris, can you grab my black Les Paul?
Back down. Bring the drums up. Hey, wait a minute. We can't leave these people here like this.
We can't?
No!
Come on, you know how we feel about our fans.
Yeah.
That was a nice little bit of connection between, you've got the screen, you've got a door that connects, that supposedly goes back into the sound booth, and so this person is, bridging that gap. But that was the only interaction, and they stopped doing that pretty shortly after the ride opened. For I think the same reason that the Galaxy's Edge cast members don't really interact with you in character as much anymore. It's hard to get minimum wage employees to become performers. You're not hiring a performer, you're hiring somebody whose job is to direct traffic or work in guest relations or whatever this cast member might be doing. And in this one day, it's really complicated because they have to memorize their cue line, they have to figure out how fast they have to go, they have to figure out how to pick it up, they have to figure out when to bring it back, where to put it, for the rest of the pre-show, when to bring it back, and they got to do this on a rotation. And if that person's gone, you got to train somebody else. So it's an understudy instead of just a regular fill-in, and it's just complicated. And so the question is sort of how much value is this bringing, and how much is it worth that for us to continue this operationally? And so that's why you no longer have that interaction in the pre-show. That's why the cast members in Galaxy's Edge aren't really performing anymore, as much at least, because that's not their job. And so it's really cool when they can, but it's hard to do that consistently. And so especially when they cut that element from the pre-show, it really was just looking past an empty room to a smaller screen. And I think making it so you have just, you have the soundboard in there, you have the equipment, you have some animatronics, which we'll get to in a second. It fills up the space more, and then you can look through the glass, and on the far side, you'll see the Mayhem, which I think makes more sense because I feel like that's the best way to do them. They're playing instruments, so they really can't be animatronics, because an animal playing drums animatronic would be hard. They're not going to have actual puppets here, so a screen is the way you do that. And it makes sense for them to be on the other side of the screen. And I think I like the idea of them being in progress of playing. I'm hoping that means like the beginning of the pre-show is them finishing up a sound check or maybe even a recording session. And so we get to hear them perform something. We get to hear them perform one of their original songs. And that's sort of the beginning of the pre-show is them ending that. And then we can do all the business they're in. But we actually get to see them perform, which isn't something that we got to see with this current version. And we know that the soundtrack to this ride is going to be the Mayhem performing covers of classic rock songs. We don't have the track list yet, but we do know it's going to be that kind of music, which is fine. I prefer that to a non-Muppets anything. I was worried it was going to be just, regular classic rock. So I like that it's going to be a Muppets cover of it. I think specifically in the Mayhem, but I don't think we know for sure. But I'm hoping that at least one of their songs gets featured in some way, and this would be a cool way to do that. And then on the closer side of the pre-show room, in the sound booth, we can see there are a couple screens with Kermit and Piggy on them, which I like the fact that they're included in this. Screens aren't my favorite way, but I understand they're puppets. Then the penguins are running the sound booth, which is fantastic. They were the musicians in Muppet Vision, and I love that they got upgraded to this. I know that in Muppet Vision, they were always reacting to the show, even if they weren't actively playing something. They were looking around and responding, and I hope that they continue to do that. They're just sort of moving and turning their heads. Can penguins turn their heads? I don't actually know. But they're reacting to the show. And I don't know if they're going to reuse those animatronics or not, but I think it's cool. And then we've got what appears to be a scooter animatronic. And that's really exciting. We haven't gotten a scooter one. We've gotten Statler and Waldorf and Bean Bunny. We've gotten Honeydew and Beaker with the Muppet Mobile Lab. But I don't think we've gotten a scooter animatronic. And so that's exciting. And I like that Scooter's involved in this, because the reason that the Muppets are here is because Scooter's uncle, who's a real estate mogul who owns the Muppet Theater, which is... fine. Also bought GeForce Records, which is the already existing record company from this ride. And I guess as part of that, now he owns GeForce Records because he bought the building, which means he owns the company, which means that his nephew and his friends get to run the company. It's a little bit complicated, which I kind of like. It feels like a very Muppets backdoor plot sort of thing. And so now the Mayhem is... I think the Muppets are in charge, and the Mayhem are recording an album there because the Muppets are in charge. And I like that Scooter's involved, because he's not the most popular Muppet necessarily. There are about 12 different versions of this ride that don't include him, but I like that he's included because it makes it feel more like it was made by people that understand the Muppets, which wasn't a guarantee. And I love that we're getting the animatronic, and I love that means, I'm guessing, that these characters are going to be important in the pre-show, because, they cut the getting the guitar bit from this pre-show. I imagine there are ways that they will be able to downsize this pre-show, and I'm hoping that doesn't involve removing these animatronics, because they're filling up the room more, which is great, and I just hope it stays that way. The sound booth feels very chill. There are those lights hanging from the ceiling, which feel very millennial, backyard, chill vibes. And that's not what the Muppets are. That might be what GeForce Records is. And I imagine that, the rationale is that, well, but the Muppets are taking over this space, and so what would the Muppets be like in this space? But no, the Muppets will take over any space they're in. So I wish, and offhand Disney made a video on this, and I'm sort of reiterating what he said, but I do wish there were, I wish that like this room looked more like the pre-show to Muppet Vision, where there were just crates everywhere and things hanging from the ceiling. They would take over the space, and they would make it feel Muppety. And I wish it was a little bit more Muppety in here. There's still time. Concept art always gets revised, and so I'm hoping it just gets a little bit more, a little bit less organized in here. I imagine the main ride will be pretty much the same, because right now it's just a giant big black box with some neon props and stuff. And it actually does say the iconic scenery and landmarks of Tinseltown will feature a Muppet twist. So I imagine that, the palm trees will probably stay there. Some of the signs will be, the Hollywood sign's probably going to be there. Maybe they'll add something like the bus or the hot air balloon or something. I can't imagine they're going to change too much, because you can't fundamentally change a lot of it. So it's just, what Muppet things are you going to put, I imagine, alongside the current things. This seems to be adding Muppets to the thing that already exists. So I don't imagine we're going to get a lot of giant changes to the main ride, which, again, is fine. Something I do want, and I saw this idea online, is at the end of the ride, right before you get to the unload station, there's a spot where you're sort of sitting for a little bit waiting. And I want them to put Statler and Waldorf on a bench or in a car or something over there. And I want them to talk to the people on the ride as they're waiting. Kind of like what Roz does at the end of Mike and Sully to the Rescue over in California. And so I like the idea of like Statler and Waldorf heckling the riders as they are waiting to get to the unload station. I think that could be really cool. I also, my request is the entrance arch, which I imagine is going to stay the same. They kept the guitar, and the guitar, the stem of the guitar turns into the track for the limousine that is part of the entrance arch. So I imagine that if they're keeping the guitar, they're keeping the arch too. And I had, a while ago, proposed a retheme to Rock and Roller Coaster that was Roger Rabbit, and I suggested putting Roger hanging from the limousine upside down at the arch. And my request is that I think it would be really cool that Disney did that with Animal. They had Animal hanging upside down from the limo. Bonus points if that's an animatronic, by the way, and he can look at you and sort of blink at you or something. I don't know. Bonus points if he's like a push the talking trash can situation where there's a puppeteer. There's a bench right there. The puppeteer can be sitting on the bench, and so Animal can be talking to you. It can be like, "Hey, nice hat," or "Hey, I want to eat your hat," something to do with hats, I don't know. I do imagine that Disney wouldn't love asking people to stop in the middle of the entrance. That might create some congestion, and I imagine Disney wouldn't be super thrilled at the idea of having to hang an animatronic from an archway hanging above guests' heads that they walk directly underneath. But if they could, I think it'd be really cool. I think it'd be a nice way to add some more of that zaniness to the ride. The other thing that we don't know much about is the load area, because you leave the pre-show and you enter into the sort of the streets of Hollywood, and so there are a lot of signs and little window displays and things that make you feel like you're sort of in an alley somewhere, and that could be a really cool spot to put some Muppet Easter eggs. I've seen the idea floated of like having Muppets in the windows, whether that's actual characters you can interact with, or like the Star Tours characters in the queue with their sort of just going silhouettes passing by the window. Either way, I think there's a lot you can do there, sort of making it feel like the street in the Muppets Christmas Carol. I think it would be really cool. Just adding more Muppet craziness, adding a little bit more life to it, because it does sort of feel right now like they're trying to put the Muppets into the studio, and really I think this studio will get molded to the Muppets if you're really accurate to the characters. I'm optimistic. I think cautiously so. I still don't think that Rock and Roller Coaster was the right place for the Muppets to go, but I am glad that when Muppet Vision of 3D stuck around, Disney decided to put them somewhere else. And so this is a weird choice, but I guess it makes sense. Not the worst place to go. It seems like a retheme that is not going to be the best, but also won't be the worst. And, I'll take that. Also, only one day before Disney updated us on Rock and Roller Coaster, they announced that the Muppets were coming to Broadway. Kind of. The folks behind the Muppets have been trying to get them on Broadway for basically ever. Jim Henson developed a couple different concepts when he was working on the Muppets. Disney, in I think 2013, held a secret workshop for a Disney led Muppets musical. They appeared at the Hollywood Bowl. So they've been trying over and over and over again to get this to work. And so when I read the headline, "The Muppets are coming to Broadway," I imagined that's what it was. But it's not quite. What it actually is that magician Rob Lake is doing a limited engagement holiday magic show. So it's not a play, it's not a musical, it's a magic show like you might find in Vegas or something, but on Broadway for the holiday season. And as part of that, some of the Muppets characters will be cameoing, will be a part of it. We're not sure exactly the scale of their involvement. We also don't know who's going to be a part of it. We know Kermit's going to be, but that was sort of a given. In the video that Kermit was part of with magician Rob Lake, he also mentioned by name Fozzie, Gonzo, and Miss Piggy, and then the press release also mentioned those three, so it's likely that it's those four: Kermit, Fozzie, Gonzo, and Piggy. And those seem to be the main four Muppets, at least right now. There are other characters that could be involved, but I think if you're trying to limit that, I think those are good for to pick. So we don't know how much they're going to be involved. We don't know how they're going to be involved. But yeah, it's the first time that the Muppets have appeared on a Broadway stage ever. And that feels significant. First of all, they've been trying to find a way to make this work. And now they're doing this. And it's unclear whose idea this was. If Rob Blake had a show and asked Disney if they could collaborate and include the Muppets, if Disney came to him and suggested that he do something with the Muppets, if this was, who's to say how this started. This could be some sort of research for another project. Can we, because Sesame Street has done an off-Broadway musical. And so they were in, a full house and you couldn't see the puppeteers, but they were also a smaller venue. With this Broadway theater, it's going to be harder to conceal the puppeteers, and they're going to have to figure out how do we get these characters to come on and off stage? How do we hide the puppeteers? How do we make these characters interact when we don't have the edge of the camera to do it? So it could be that this was their attempt at researching and getting that first sort of strategy off the ground in a show that it doesn't have to rely on. We don't have to figure out 2 hours full of plot. We got to figure out, a total of 10 minutes of them appearing on stage, and then we can expand that in a later project to figure out how to make it work on a narrative scale. It could also be that it has nothing to do with that, but hopefully Disney will do that now that they know how. It's interesting that this announcement comes so close to the announcement of Rock and Roller Coaster. It is likely nothing, because the show's going to play from November up until January, and so they got to sell the tickets, and so they have to announce what the show is, because I assume Muppets will drive up ticket prices, so they got to announce that before tickets go on sale, and so that announcement had to come when it did, and the Rock and Roller Coaster announcement came about a week before Destination D23, which they're not having a parks panel on this year, because normally Destination D23 is where they announce some parks stuff, and they didn't have a parks panel, but that was still sort of the cycle of announcements, so they announced like 5 things for the parks on social media leading up to that week. So there was this news, they announced some stuff about the Zootopia show coming to Animal Kingdom, they announced some Big Thunder Mountain stuff, so they announced a couple different things, and this was one of them. And so, alright, they announced the Muppets news as part of the rest of the theme park news, but it is weird that it was literally one day apart, and also in the middle of the Muppets' 70th anniversary celebration. So it's weird, right? It's weird that these two things happened back to back so quickly during the anniversary if Disney wasn't trying to build up to something. So are they trying to research a bigger Broadway show and they're using this magic show as a proof of concept? Do they have bigger plans for the Muppets and they're trying to drum up some support that way? Are they going to bring Muppet Vision back in some way? There's been some rumors about that. Will it go next door in the Sunset Showcase Theater once the villain show leaves because the Magic Kingdom's getting a whole villain's land? Are they going to reboot the Muppet Show? There's been a whole bunch of rumors about that. There was one earlier this year that got debunked, but I guess the rumors come back, and apparently it's more legit this time. Who's to say if the people saying it's legit are legit, but there's been a lot of chatter about that. It's hard to say exactly what's going on, and it's very likely nothing. But either way, even if this doesn't lead to anything, the fact that Disney is still at least invested in the Muppets enough to give us something. They're giving us some kind of Muppets on Broadway, even if it's not the full show, and they're giving us a Muppets attraction, even if it's not the one we want, because the one we want is doing fine. It's encouraging that Disney still is willing to try these things, and even if neither one of them are, in my opinion, the best fit for the characters, I'm still excited. I'm still excited to see pictures of people who can afford to go see the show on Broadway, and I'm excited. I don't love Rock and Roller Coaster as a ride, but I'm willing to do it if there's Muppets involved. I'm gonna be like, that's the first attraction I'm gonna ride the first time I go to Disney World after it opens, and I'm gonna wait in the queue, and I'm gonna take all the pictures and videos, and I'm gonna like hold up the line. They're gonna tell me, come on, like, no, I gotta watch the pre-show 4 times first. I gotta study Scooter. I gotta see how that works. Then I have to do it again, where I can watch the penguins, and I can watch each individual penguin, because man, those penguins are very expressive. I really hope that they're as expressive in the pre-show of this ride as they were during Muppet Vision. Does that mean that we're gonna get a Muppets gift store? That just occurred to me because the gift store for Muppet Vision was across the street in the Studio One company store, and it was shut down for a while. It was COVID, and then the entirety of the time after that. But they had a whole store full of Muppets merchandise that was themed to the hotel from, I think it was Take Manhattan? And there is a gift store from Rock and Roller Coaster, and so I imagine some of that's going to be G-Force Records merch, or Rock and Roller Coaster merch, or Hollywood Studios merch. But are we going to get Muppets merchandise in a dedicated store again? That'd be cool. Is there going to be exclusive Muppets merchandise during the Magic Show? Because most Broadway shows have merch booths, and I assume some of that's going to be Rob Lake's merch. But is there going to be Muppets merch? Will there be like a Kermit the Frog themed Magic set? If there's a Kermit the Frog themed Magic set, so many options, so many things. Are we getting a reboot of the Muppet Show? Probably not. Are we going to get a Kermit the Frog Magic set? Who's to say? Am I going to be able to buy another Kermit the Frog thermos? I have a Kermit the Frog thermos. Maybe. Do I need one? No, but could I buy one? There are so many options. And that's, I think, why this news is so exciting, is both of these announcements are exciting. Coming within, 1 day of each other is even more exciting, and potentially speculation into something, but we don't really know what, and we don't really know if it's going to be anything. So we'll just have to keep our eyes out, I guess. Either way, I'm excited about what's coming. But what do you think? What are you hoping for from Rock and Roller Coaster? Are you excited for the Muppets on Broadway, even if only technically? Let me know in the comments. Let's talk about how cool the Muppets are, because, hot take, the Muppets are cool. Until next time, be sure to gather all your carry-on items from the undersea compartment and exit to your